Okay, so you guys did ISO, which adjusts the digital sensor, right? Now you're going to learn about depth of field, which is also called your f-stop, and it has to do with your aperture. So that has to do with your lens and how far your lens can see. So depending on the setting that you set, either your lens is open very wide and you let a lot of light in, or your lens gets closed and you can see farther, but you let less light in. So if you look at this picture here, this one is set to a high f-stop, which means that the lens was closed, which means it can see farther. So if you look, you can see like the details all the way in the top of the building. That's really far away, right? So you can only see details like that if you have a large f-stop, which is a large depth of field, okay? But we are going to be concentrating on small depth of field just because I like them and they're artsy, and there's not really much to take pictures of around here that's far away that are interesting. So what you guys are going to be doing is you guys were on M for ISO. Now you're going to be set to the AV mode on the top of your camera. That lets you adjust the f-stop, which is what we're going to be learning and concentrating on, and it lets you adjust the ISO. You're going to have to adjust both of those. Now you know ISO, you're adding on the f-stop, and I'll go over how to do that. So remember, I've been over this before. You've seen this diagram a bunch of times. Your ISO has to do with the electronic sensor and how sensitive it is, right? So when there's a lot of light, what do you set the ISO to? Low, good. My last class just looked at me with like vacant stares. They made me feel really bad. And if it's like cloudy or if it's like darker out, you set it higher, right? So that is going to work with this now, because this, if it's open wide, what happens to the amount of light that comes in? So what would you set the the ISO to? Lower, right? Because you're letting more light in, right? So it has to do with the light that comes into the camera, right? So if your lens is open wider, your ISO has to be set lower, right? But if your lens gets closed, your ISO goes what? Up, higher. Well, at least one person listened to me. That's good. Okay, so you have to adjust your ISO with your f-stop, depending on what you are doing and where you are taking the picture. All right. So the f-stops measure the size of the aperture. So f-stop numbers, you might have more options than this when you actually go out because these cameras are a little bit more advanced. But the traditional f-stop numbers are 4, 5.6, 8, 11, 16, 22. These ones you probably won't even do because these are like, you hardly let any light in. And many of you, yours won't go down to 4 because it has to do with your lighting conditions and your other settings. So 4, 5.6, those ones are going to be where the lens is open wide and you're letting a lot of light in. F8 is kind of middle of the road. There's actually a saying for photography called F8 and wait. Or just you start at F8, take a couple pictures, see what it looks like, and then you can make a determination from there. And then 11, 16 are when you're in like darker or like cloudy, maybe more than cloudy, but whatever. So the depth of field changes with these settings. So how far your lens can see changes with what you do here with your settings. And we are going to be concentrating on 4, 5.6 because those blur the background because it only sees what's in front. And I think it's more interesting around the school to take pictures like that because there aren't things that really are interesting to take pictures of far away. So this shows you what the inside of the camera looks and why you have what those settings mean. So F2 is the focal length, which is these are the number of stops inside. So if it's at 2, these are open wider, you can only fit 2. The camera doesn't see as far. F4, also the camera doesn't see that far, but you put 4 stops in, that closes it a little bit. F8 8 stops and it closes more. F16, it closes more. But with F16, you're really not letting a lot of light in. So you have to change other settings later when you get into manual mode. So these are 2 different pictures of 2 different f-stops. These was taken with traditional film. Ansel Adams is a very famous landscape photographer. But you can see a lot of the rock details all the way in the back, and you can see the mountains in the back. So this was a low f-stop or a high f-stop? No, high, because you see farther. Remember, the larger, the higher the f-stop, the farther your lens sees. The smaller the f-stop, the lens doesn't see as far. So that's what you have to remember. It's counterintuitive because the higher the number, it makes it small. It makes the lens smaller, right? So it's kind of weird to think of. So the higher the number, the lens gets smaller. But what I think of is the higher the number, the farther it can see. Okay. The lower the number, the wider it is, the less far it can see. So I try to think of it that way because it's kind of counterintuitive. You kind of feel like the number should match. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to set the f-stop. You're going to control the depth of field. In the AV mode, the camera is going to choose the shutter speed, but you can adjust the ISO. And I want you to adjust the ISO. You're building on what you've learned so far. And I want you to start thinking about how they work together. So for some reasons, your ISO, if some reason your pictures, like even whatever's in front comes in blurry, then that means that your shutter speed is slowing down for some reason. And then you need to come to me and I can help you adjust that. But it should be okay. So this shows you what the picture looks like depending on the f-stop. So F4, you have less depth of field, right? So whatever's in front is going to be in clear, and whatever is in the back is going to be blurry. In order to do this, you need to take a picture of something up close, right? You can't just take a picture like this and expect whatever's in front to be clear and whatever's in back to be blurry. You need to have something closer to your camera, okay? Remember, it can't be too close because then your camera's not going to focus on it and take the picture. But when you're taking your pictures, you want to have something in front kind of closer that the camera can focus on, right? And then whatever's in the background is going to blur. Now, in order to get the background to blur, you need depth. That's why it's called depth of field. So if I want to take a picture of this, right, and I put it on this table here, and I take a picture from above, it's not going to blur the background because it ends here. There's no background. There's no depth, right? If I take it this way, there's depth. So all back here would be blurred, right? And this would be in focus. Okay? So when you go out and take pictures, like I had people last year and taking pictures like this, looking straight down, and they're like, it's not blurring. I'm like, that's because you have no depth, right? So you need to, when you take your pictures, you need to take it at an angle where there is depth so it can blur the background. Does that make sense? Yes, yes, yes. So as you go up, F8, your camera sees farther and then blurs the very far back. F16, F22, it starts to see really far. Everything comes clear. So it depends on what you're doing. Like if you're taking architectural photos, you probably want an F16 or an F22. But if you're taking, up close pictures of things, you're going to want F4, F5.6. All right. So this also shows you in real life what it looks like. So this is F10. You can see all 3 cups, right? F5. Actually, your F5 would blur more than this on these cameras, but you can see the difference. This is clear and these start to get blurry. But when you have the f-stop set even lower, the background blurs completely and this is in focus. So that's your goal. But you should be able to do that at 5.6, not 1.8. The lenses that you have on your camera won't even go as low as 5.8. So here you can see, again, same picture taken at 2 different shutter speeds. F20, you can see every glass, right? And you can kind of see the details in here. f1.8, you see blurs immediately, and it kind of makes this cool, like where it all meshes together. So those are the differences between the shutter speeds. What shutter is this? A low shutter speed? I mean, not shutter speed, depth of field. Is this a low depth of field, small depth of field, or a large depth of field? What do you guys think? Low. Good. Why? The background is blurred. This is an up close picture of a root from like a Japanese kind of whatever plant. But you can see these are all focused, and it actually becomes kind of abstract in the way it is. But these are in focus, and the things in back are blurred. So that would be an example of a small depth of field. Okay, so